mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they revile and persecute you, and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you.
This is Everyday Orthodox with Elisa Bielatich, a live listener call-in show where we share the stories of everyday Orthodox people as we get to know the members of the body of Christ. Join the conversation. We invite you to call in with questions at 1-855-AF-RADIO, 1-855-237-2346.
It is Sunday, June 7th, 2020, and we are live on Ancient Faith Radio. Welcome to Everyday Orthodox. I'm Elisa Bielatich. And you know, we get together here every Sunday night to build community and conversation. We're here live on Ancient Faith. You can call in and join our conversation. Give us a call at 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. 2346. John Maddox is here answering your calls, and we have the chat room open. That's ancientfaith.com/radio/live. And tonight we're going to have a great show. You know, as always, I always find Orthodox people pretty fascinating. I think our church is full of all kinds of interesting people with different stories. And of course, we have a lot of immigrants in the church. We have a lot of converts in the church. Sometimes we have both. And today we'll be talking to Father Deacon David John Williams. And he is really interesting. And actually, those of you who are regular listeners will recall that he's actually been on the show before. He came on the show, quite a while ago to talk about the sharing of sacred space. December 20th, 2018, if you want to look that up and listen to it if you missed it. It was really a fun conversation, and we got to talk about his youth in the UK. He grew up in the church in Wales, or not in the Orthodox Church, pardon me, but he grew up in the Welsh Church. And over the years, he was a musician. He came to the United States on a visa, touring with with a band, and over these years, he ended up staying in the United States. He met a nice girl. He's done all kinds of different things. And so when we talked before, we focused a lot on his childhood. We focused on those years as a professional musician. And then also he became involved in fashion and design. And he was designing shoes for a high-end Italian designer for a long time. And so he has a lot of artistic talent and a lot of artistic energy, but he's also very academic. And in fact, I believe he was working on his PhD and finishing up when we last spoke. So my guess is that he's finished that by now, but I don't know. We'll have to find out in a moment. But so in fact, he now is working for Riza Orthodox Vestments, and that is a ministry of the Serbian Orthodox Diocese of Australia and New Zealand. And so he's working on Orthodox vestments, which is sort of an artistic outlet for him, but also he is a deacon in the Serbian Orthodox Church, which is kind of amazing in itself. An immigrant from the United Kingdom coming over and finding Orthodoxy through the Serbian Orthodox Church. It's kind of beautiful. It's really neat. And so we got through a lot of that story earlier, but we didn't really get a lot of opportunity to talk about the vestments or to talk about his position at St. Catherine's University. And so I don't know if everybody's familiar with it, but you definitely should look into it. It's interesting. St. Catherine's is it's not that new anymore, but in the past decade or so, it's a new Orthodox university in San Diego, California. And so Father Deacon David John Williams is actually a professor there. So we'll be able to talk a little bit more about those aspects of his life, about his PhD work, about becoming a professor, how he likes it there, what he's up to at St. Catherine's, as well as, of course, his work with the vestments and just the rest of his story, because we just did not get far enough. Sometimes our guests are just really interesting, and you have to give them a second hour, and that's how it's worked out. So again, if you want to join this conversation, give us a call, 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. Join us in the chat room at ancientfaith.com/radio/live. And without any further ado, I'd like to welcome to the program Deacon David John Williams. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much for having me back. And I'm not quite sure what else there is you've left off you want to cover.
I know. Well, I mean, that was a lot of stuff, really. And the first time we talked, I know we were able to talk about you growing up in the United Kingdom. And if I remember correctly, your uncle was a priest there, right? And he had a lot of influence on you as you were growing up. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Look, so I'm a Welshman, and I've been here in the States for, you know what, I'm really, really bad. The irony is that I teach history, but I can never remember dates. I keep forgetting how old I am, all of that kind of stuff. But I've been here since 2006, I guess. So, it's...
there you go.
14
years.
Well, look, your ad actually sparked some real controversy on my Facebook page. I don't know if you're aware of this.
I am not aware of this. What did I say?
As usual, you're there causing trouble on social media.
You know what? It's a problem I have. It really is. What on earth did I say?
The controversy was that I was described as an English-born whatever
That's right.
else. I don't know.
That's right, and you're Welsh.
Rather than the proud Welshman that I am, and my compatriots took it very. They thought that I abandoned them. So
I am so sorry. I realized my mistake today, actually, because I was listening again to the episode from 2018 because I didn't want to ask you the same questions again and, irritate my listeners. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't ask anything that we'd already discussed. And as I was listening, I went, oh, Wales, that's right. That is right. Sorry about that. But Wales is Wales like a pretty Wales is happily married to England. Is that a fair thing to say? Unlike, were the Welsh always fighting to separate?
Like most marriages, they appear happy. you don't necessarily get the full picture, right? But
Yes.
I think that we're part of the UK, but Wales is its own country, and there's been a strong independence movement for a very long time. We were annexed, actually. I say we, of course. I wasn't walking around in the 13th century when it happened. Wales was incorporated into England, but then devolution happened, and it was declared its own independent country in the 90s. But there's a very I don't want to bore you with all of the details, because I bore everyone that knows me by giving them trivia about Wales all of the time. So.
It sounds a little bit analogous. I know you're a deacon in the Serbian church. It sounds a little bit like Montenegro and Serbia. Would you say that it's a similar kind of relationship? Montenegro is independent, and it's a different place. And when you speak to a Montenegrin and you say, "Oh, he's Serbian," it's like, "No, he's not Serbian. He's Montenegrin." But at the same time, there's an affinity there as well. I am a troublemaker, it turns out. I apologize.
Wow. We're less than 10 minutes into this. No, look, Wales has its own language.
Okay. That's true, right.
I know technically you can go to a lot of places in the Balkans and say, "Oh, I'm speaking Montenegrin, I'm speaking Bosnian or whatever," and it's all Serbian. Sorry. That's not quite the case in Wales, but things haven't been sort of violent. Not that they have been in Montenegro and Serbia either, but of late. But it's mainly confined now to the sports stadium, to be honest.
Excellent.
You see this kind of tribal expression in the rugby games usually.
Oh, that's lovely. That's neat. Okay. All right. Well, and it is funny because I have years and years ago traveled through Wales a little bit, and I do recall that the language is definitely not mutually intelligible with English. Like, I could not read a Welsh sign and understand what it said. I had to read the translated portion of it. And I think you're absolutely right. In Montenegro and Serbia, that wouldn't be an issue, right? That there's definitely, you could even argue about whether they're different languages or not, but they're definitely mutually intelligible. But absolutely. All right. Well, good. Well, we'll be careful with that in the future. Perhaps I will have to issue a Facebook apology.
No, I've made it sound so sectarian. I mean, it's really not. It's really not.
Well, sometimes these things are fun too, especially when it becomes a sports rivalry and when it takes those forms where it's really in good fun and it's a good thing. So I like that very much. But so we also talked about how here in the States, as you said, since 2006, that's right. Since you came to the States, you met your wife, you met Lauren here, right? And we talked a little bit about how the two of you met through mutual friends and all of this. Yeah. And now you have, do you still have 2 children or do you have a third now?
No, I have 4 children now.
Oh, I knew there were more, but my goodness, that's a lot. We just spoke to you in December of 2018. Oh my goodness.
Well, what can I say?
That's wonderful. Tell me about your kids. How old are they and what are they like?
Yeah, Zoe's 5. She's our eldest, and Theodore is 3, and our twins Clementine and Penelope were born on National Margarita Day this year, which is also George Washington's birthday. So that's
Excellent.
It was the 22nd.
Very nice.
Oh, no,
that's wonderful.
no, actually, I'm so sorry. It was the 20th. It was the 20th.
Well, but see, you knew the associations, like you knew George Washington, so that's pretty good. So we won't fault you
for Margarita Day before I knew it was George Washington's birthday.
It's important to know, right? That's very important. The children may need to know that at some point.
We live in Southern California. I try my best to, blend in, assume the culture.
Now, since we last spoke, again at the end of 2018, so we're just, a year and a half out, have you finished your PhD? Are you still working on it? How's that going?
Yeah, so that has been an interesting process. I'm still on track to finish it despite all of this corona intensity
Thank God.
next year, though. So because all of the campuses have been closed down, some things have had to be postponed, but I've actually been able to write somehow in this house with 4 children.
I was just going to say, coronavirus is the least of your problems, frankly. You just had twins, you have 4 children, 5 and under. God bless you. If you can get a dissertation written, that is that's an incredible feat. Congratulations on getting anywhere on that.
No, yeah, thank you. It's been the strangest thing because the twins came 40 days early, and there were, it was a bit hairy in the beginning, and so we spent 13 days in the neonatal intensive care unit with them, and right when we were coming out, coronavirus had become this huge issue. So it was as if we entered into some kind of, seclusion at that moment, and we just haven't come out of it since. So it has been an odd kind of thing, but I'm very glad to say that I've got better friends than I deserve, and I've been helped enormously. So I'm very pleased.
Thank God. Thank God. Yeah, that is remarkable. But the thing is, when you have babies who are born early, you're going to be in seclusion anyway, right? You have to protect their immune systems a little bit more than you would with a baby who was born full term. So I guess you would have been in seclusion. But wow, how surreal to have that come out of the hospital and find that the entire world has gone into seclusion is a whole different situation. Now, Yes,
it was a relief in some ways.
Was it? You knew that everybody else would stay locked up too, and that nobody would mind that you weren't showing up?
Just a bit of peace and quiet.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like a lot of us felt like that too, that it has not been so bad. I have 2 kids. I'm on the other end of it. I have 5, and 2 of them are off at college, and they came back, and it was like, oh, look at us all sitting around the house playing board games. This isn't so bad, but thank God, God willing, everyone stays healthy. But, okay, so tell me a little bit so you're still working on the PhD, and it's going fairly well despite challenges of new babies and coronavirus and all the other craziness going on. But also, you're an assistant professor of history at the University of St. Catherine in San Diego. And how is that going through coronavirus? Were you guys able to hold classes through the year? Did you shut down? What did you guys do?
Yes, we got, I think that there was a statewide mandate that everyone needed to close campus. So that happened, I think, in the middle of or maybe late March. But we were able to actually keep. I didn't miss a single lecture. Actually, we were able to keep the exact same hours. We just used Zoom and some other things, and it worked really, really smoothly. Actually, I was very pleased. It was the oddest thing. I think everyone was dreading having to do it. But then when it did happen, it was interesting interacting with students in their own sort of home environments. You got to know them a little bit better. And, it's just different. Sometimes people are more likely to speak their mind or ask a question when they feel like they're a little bit anonymous. You do have a degree of anonymity or protection when you're online. And also younger people tend to express themselves more often online as well. So I actually, I didn't hate it. It was pretty good.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And that's funny too, because I think we would assume that being in person, you would get to know people better. But I do know I had a few college students here, and we would accidentally, walk through the Zoom camera view, or I'd walk over to my daughter. She's always sitting at her computer, right? And I'd walk over and I'd be like, oh, hey, by the way, where's that? And she's turning and she's like, Mom, you've just entered my classroom. Like you're now in the conversation. Welcome. And actually, one of my girls is taking art at NYU, and her professor graciously allowed my 10-year-old daughter to sit with her and join the class. So, it is interesting. It was a very interesting experience, I think, for all of us to find that, maybe we can be a little more informal and closer to one another even online. It's very unexpected, very much so. So what class are you teaching now? You're teaching history. What kind of history?
Oh, goodness. I'm currently teaching, actually. So I'm teaching some summer classes. I teach Western civilization, so kind of a survey course, and an American history course. Both of them actually fall within the integrated core at the University of St. Catherine, which is something that's just really, really special, and I enjoy very much. Pulling together a number of disciplines there, and they're all mandatory courses. So they sort of feed into one another. The Western Civilization course is followed up with this American Experiment course, and I teach both of them. I don't teach any other courses in the integrated core, but I teach those, and it's really neat when you see the students go from, learning about the Renaissance, Reformation, and Enlightenment, etc., and then being able to trace those ideas, and the consequences of certain movements and whatnot, actually, on the other continent or in the New World. So that's really really cool, because they can draw a line, I think. From someone out here, and they can trace a lot of practices and things backwards. Something that I just taught that was really interesting was, George Whitefield, the Great Awakening preacher.
Yes.
Out here, yeah. So,
so he's one of the early American preachers. There's a whole part of American history where the preachers are incredibly influential, right? I know when my kids, I don't even remember it from when I was young, but I know that when my kids study American history, there's always, this series of amazing preachers and honestly sometimes some very crazy sermons, right, that were very influential, like sinners in the hands of an angry God, things like that were all happening at the same time, right?
Jonathan Edwards he'd probably be the most sort of famous one, but and then you have kind of those small sort of bonfire of the vanities type of things where people are throwing expensive trousers in there and then sort of looking at each other afterwards, trouserless, and realizing that they may have got a little bit out of control. But I bring up Whitefield because we look at the use of relics, for example, from late antiquity onwards. And one thing I didn't realize was that Whitefield's tomb was actually broken into at the start of the Revolutionary War, and American soldiers were actually sort of snapping bits of his body off and his tearing parts of his clothing off, and it just reminded me so much of our own Orthodox understanding of relics and the supernatural protection that they bring. So they were carrying these on their person into battle, and you think about the American Revolution as something that is just so divorced from from that mindset, but it was pretty interesting.
It is interesting, absolutely. Well, and there's a Serbian priest, you probably know him, Father Russell. He is up in Montana in the Serbian churches up there, and I'm losing his last name all of a sudden. Radojevic. Radojic. At any rate, Father Russell loves to talk about the fact that the American Revolution was fought on the old calendar, and so it's like, there are a lot of ways that that's not what we picture when we think about the American Revolution at all. But at any rate, I don't think we think about relics a bit with that mindset, I suppose. But so you talk about the integrated core. Tell me a little bit about what you mean by that. So you're teaching these 2 history classes, but the students you have are they're not history students necessarily, right? Are you teaching all the kids? Like, how is that?
Well, full disclosure, they're not really history courses, but history is where my training is. So that's the predominant approach that I use. So I do teach history courses separately, but in the integrated core, it's mandatory for all students, because it's a liberal arts, college, to take, a number of courses there, and they have capstone projects at the end of each of them. I'm sorry. Well, I'm sorry. I think I've lost track of what the question was.
I was just curious about the integrated core. Generally, like, what does that mean for I have some kids in college, so I'm hearing all the time about core classes and all of this, but I think a lot of our listeners are further away from sort of university talk. So what is that? What is that?
So basically, the idea is, it's based on the trivium and quadrivium of old, right? That there are there's been this unfortunate tendency, I think, in higher education out here to just sort of present this smorgasbord of classes and just say go, and just expect the students to pick together a cohesive course load and to understand what major they want and all of the rest, and that's why you end up with people changing their major 3 or 4 times and taking taking units that they don't need and all of the rest. And so and this happened all long before I arrived at the university. So, you should really talk to Dr. Frank, the president and founder. But the idea is that there is a highly curated, integrated core which brings together a number of disciplines which are integral to the liberal arts. And so they start with an introduction to rhetoric. There are a number of philosophy-based courses as well. We offer Greek there as well, which helps. And these are mandatory to all students. We have we have a really diverse, actually, group of students, like super diverse. They're not all in the humanities. And it's, I think, a positive thing,
Absolutely. And of course, St. Catherine's it's pan-Orthodox, right? It's not necessarily associated with a specific jurisdiction. Am I making that up, or is that real?
No, you are not making it up.
Okay, good.
Well, it's pan-Orthodox in that it's open to all, and it operates with the blessing of all of the local bishops, actually. And
wonderful.
But it's not as in like a seminary kind of situation where it's under the omophore of a particular bishop or jurisdiction, which is great because it gives us a little bit of freedom from any of the kind of squabbling that is associated with that comes along with that sometimes, or any kind of prejudices or
right.
whatever.
Well, and you never know, right? I mean, sometimes different things happen that are outside of our control, especially here in the United States, where we'll have little small schisms that happen on the other side of the world. It's very nice when things can be very continuous with the studies at a university where we have enough against us in the sense of, trying to start an Orthodox school. We're not a big crowd of people. Do you have students who are not Orthodox there, or is it just Orthodox students?
Well, we do. Actually. We have a lot of students that come from various Christian backgrounds. We have multi-faith backgrounds now I think about it, we do have students from all kinds of walks of life. We have them actually from all over the world. We have a number of international students. We've got a very strong sports program there, which has brought in a number of international students that are playing there with us as athletes, while attaining an education. So it's really, really broad, and it's wonderful actually to have. You can have a cradle Orthodox student in the classroom with someone that's never set foot in a church before coming in their life. But we do have mandatory chapel services, and Orthodox theology is something that's also mandated as well. It's part of our program. So they get they get introduced. And the idea is, I think, really that it's the Orthodox ethos is what's important. We're not a seminary, and although we're doing our best to encourage theology and develop theology programs further on, that's not going to be the experience of every student, and that's not what every student wants to do, right? So
Absolutely.
we're very happy to have as diverse a student body as possible in order to be a witness,
Right.
And like you said, we're so tiny, the Orthodox here, that it's wonderful to be able to introduce in an educational and safe environment people to Orthodoxy in that way. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's really neat. I've been following St. Catherine's from the beginning, and it's just so neat to see things grow and develop as they have. I think it's just beautiful. But so we are going to take a short break. I want to remind our audience, if you have any questions or comments, you want to join the conversation, you're welcome. Our number is 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. We're going to take a very short break. We'll be back with Father Deacon David John Williams, and we'll be talking about his work with vestments and also about some upcoming conferences and things that are happening with St. Catherine's that you might be interested in attending. So we'll be right back.
Everyday Orthodox with Elisa Bieletich will be back in a moment. Give Elisa and her guest a call at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO.
He lost his wealth. He lost his family. He lost his station. He endured it all to gain everything. Roman commander Placidus was a man of great power and influence. He and his family wanted for little, yet he knew there had to be more to life. Once baptized into the Christian faith as Evstathius, he faced trials beyond anything he had ever experienced on the battlefield. His faith was challenged, but that same faith gained him eternal life. Meet this great man in Ancient Faith Publishing's first graphic novel, The Cross and the Stag, by Gabriel Wilson. The first in our Among the Saints series, written to both inspire children and adults. To find this book and others like it, you can go to store.ancientfaith.com. Again, that is store.ancientfaith.com.
Here's His Grace Bishop Anthony from the Antiochian Diocese of Toledo and the Midwest.
This beautiful ministry, Ancient Faith Ministries, which gives us wonderful lectures, wonderful available resources to live our Orthodox life and to strengthen the local parishes all across this country and indeed all across the world.
Thanks for your support in helping make Ancient Faith Ministries strong. All donations are tax deductible at ancientfaith.com/support. That's ancientfaith.com/support.
We're back with Everyday Orthodox with Elisa Bieletich. Do you have a question for Elisa and today's guest? Call in now at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO. Here again is Elisa.
And welcome back to Everyday Orthodox. We are here tonight with Father Deacon David John Williams, a Welshman not a British man, not an Englishman, a Welshman who is an immigrant to the United States. He came over here. He found Orthodoxy. He became a deacon in the Serbian Orthodox Church in San Diego, California, where he also is a professor of history at St. Catherine's University, which is a fairly young Orthodox university here in the States, which is in itself a very exciting sort of thing. But so Father Deacon David, John Williams, do you go by David or John? Are you Father David? Is that really how you generally are addressed? How does it work? It's too many names for me.
Yeah, it's too many. Well, you can talk for stars. So as far as names go, being in the Serbian church, I do. It's not quite as bad as a Greek church, actually, now I think about it. But yes, I just go by David, I actually really dislike titles. I don't have a problem using them. I always address people as Father, but I prefer to be called David because it's my name, It's my dad's name. It's the name of my patron saint, St. David of Wales. So, yeah, David. David is fine. Oh my goodness.
Excellent. Well, so we've been talking about St. Catherine's a bit, and one thing that you said that really interests me is that when things switched over to an online forum, it didn't seem to slow down the class, and in some ways you got to know the students better, maybe differently or better or something, that there was something maybe more casual and informal about the interactions there. I think that's really an interesting question. And I know that you have a conference coming up where you'll be speaking, I think, and it seems to me that it was supposed to be in person and it switched over to be online. Is that correct?
Well, yes, we have a really interesting collaboration partnership with the Institute of Orthodox Christian Studies in Cambridge, and we have the first of hopefully many joint conferences. But this pandemic has actually, I think, presented a couple of opportunities for us in that we can make it available to a wider group of people by having it solely online. So that'll be happening at the end of the month. But and it's going to be on also I think a really interesting topic. I mean, the topic is sacred space, and you've talked about what it's like interacting with students when they're at home, but for an enormous amount of us Orthodox, we have been attending church services inside our home, and so we've been negotiating and reevaluating, well, where is sacred space? Where is profane space? How do we reconcile the fact that, I may be sitting in this room wearing, my pajamas, or much less, and there be a church service streaming in the other room. It's a really unusual circumstance that we found ourselves in, and it's, I think, opened up a number of interesting conversations that should be had about the construction of sacred space, especially in this time.
Absolutely. I think that really is very interesting. I know I do a lot of ministry with families and trying to convince my own children that they're in church when they are watching a YouTube, transmission of a live church service. It's been up and down, right? And it's very interesting because in many ways, of course, you're not in a sacred space, but maybe you can create sacred space. Maybe there's a way that space becomes sacred because you use it in that way. Are those the kind of things you're thinking about?
Right. Yes, absolutely. For example, a really good thing to think about is when a church is abandoned or converted into another space, does it really cease being a church? Because when something is consecrated, right, is it only sacred based on our own activity or based on our own perception, or has an ontological change actually happened that sets that place, that space apart from the rest of the profane world? And that actually sort of strikes at the heart of what most of my research is about, and also in terms of shared sacred space, where people from different religions can disagree on every single point except for, that person there, that saint, that's a holy person.
Yes.
They can disagree about everything, but acknowledge holiness and want to draw near to it and gain whatever they can, sacred power or blessing from that person.
Isn't that interesting? Since you and I last spoke, I was able to go to the Holy Land, and I was at the tomb of King David, right? The prophet and king, wrote all the Psalms. King David, his tomb is considered, it's a Jewish holy space, but of course there are a lot of us Christians who come in because we love King David, right? And so it's interesting to think, we often think about the idea that, we have the Old Testament in common, both with Jewish people and then also with Muslims. But it's not just the Old Testament like a book, it's the Old Testament people and places. And maybe as Americans so far away, it's hard to think of spaces. I don't know how to put this, and maybe you would be better at describing it or answering it, but because we have such a shallow history, and especially here in the West, right? I'm in Texas, you're in California. We don't have places, we don't have buildings that are very old, right? But you go to Europe, you go to the Middle East, and suddenly there are buildings where they're saying, okay, this stone was set here 4,000 years ago. And it's amazing, right? So does that also, do you think it's harder for Americans to think of sacred space in the same way that you might think about it in a place like the Middle East?
No, I think that that Americans, especially early on and today as well, they find, I say they, I mean, I consider myself an American as well, but here it's different, and that you find that mysterium tremendum, that in nature, actually. And I think that you can see it in the way that, the national parks are venerated as kind of sacred spaces as well, by a lot of people. I do think it's different, but there's a reason why Muhammad prayed towards Jerusalem before he ever prayed towards Mecca, right? It's because that was the preeminent sacred space at the time, before he had a change of heart, right, and decided that he was going to purify the Kaaba, which was a polytheistic temple beforehand, right, and probably included icons of the Theotokos, etc. But once that was sorted out, then Muslims could pray towards that, right? If you think about it also in terms of maps, just the way that maps are created, what goes in the center, well, the thing that is psychologically most important to you, they're created by perspective, not by the kind of scientific reality. Jerusalem is always at the center of old maps, and if you ever ask a child to draw a picture of draw a map of the world, their country will always be 2 or 3 times bigger than the neighboring ones.
Right.
So,
well, and it's like these
space is interesting.
Absolutely. We had a foreign exchange student from Montenegro in our house for a year. And at one point we were looking at a map and she couldn't find anything on the map. And, she was like, pull up a Montenegrin map. And we pulled up a map online and we were just laughing because Montenegro was in the center of it. And it's like, oh my goodness, the United States is the center of my map. Montenegro is the center of yours. It's the first time I ever thought of that. But it is true. We put whatever's important in the center. I love what you mentioned about the national parks. And that is interesting, isn't it? That these beautiful natural spaces become our sacred spaces. And they're also very historic. They're very old, right? We stand at the Grand Canyon. We talk about how long that Grand Canyon has been there, how many millions of years ago. And so in a sense, I've never thought of that as analogous, but it is very interesting about this idea that on the other side of the world, of course, you have places that have been sacred for thousands of years. That is very lovely. Thank you. I will be looking forward to thinking about that.
Yeah, well, it's not just here, because if you think about a lot of the, I mean, even in the life of Christ, mountains are very important, caves, geographical features, physical topography is really important, and we've always associated mountains, for example, with holiness, right? Because they're closer to heaven, and they make us feel insignificant. So there's that too. The way that we construct an idea of the sacred and profane in that regard too. Yeah.
That really is interesting. And when I was in the Middle East, when I was in Israel and Palestine, it was very interesting I sort of realized, there are all these caves in the scriptures. And the great thing about a cave is it's still there thousands of years later, right? Buildings fall down, all these other, but this is just like a hole in the rock. It's still there. And it's remarkable. It's lovely. It's very wise of God, right, to be giving us sacred spaces like mountains and caves that are sort of permanent features. And no matter what kingdoms change hands over time, you still have all of those places, and you can still find them on the map, no matter who's making the map.
That's very true, but but we also remake them in our minds, by coming up with different narratives. Like Hagia Sophia, for example, there's all of this current nonsense about Erdogan having Islamic prayers said in there, right. And of course, to us, Hagia Sophia will always be a cathedral, the main one. But when the Ottomans took the Byzantine Empire, instead of knocking the most impressive building down, they constructed a new narrative about it, and they just simply said, "Oh, it was a mosque from the very beginning." The time-traveling Islamic prophet Al-Qaeda appeared to Justinian in a dream and told him exactly what to build, and it was supposed to be a mosque from the very beginning. You have been using it on loan. So these stories are, and you hear them all over the place, in Damascus as well. But I don't know if you know this, it's just a general kind of fact, but if you let me speak for too long, I'll just give you lots of trivia. But
I'm a trivia fan. I enjoy this very much.
Well, look, when the dome collapsed for the first time, according to the Ottoman tradition, Al-Qaeda, the green man, the time-traveling prophet, appeared again and said, "Look, you need to go to Mecca. There's a baby that's been born there, and you need to take a bowl of saliva from him and mix that saliva with the earth from Mecca and water from a well, which is called Zamzam, and there's a whole thing in that, but anyway, it doesn't really matter. And then you mix that and you make mortar out of it. That's the only thing that's strong enough to hold the dome. So what that does is, it makes so to a lot of people, Hagia Sophia's dome is in fact a relic of the prophet himself, who can't be depicted, but is physically present there, right, by his saliva.
That's fascinating. That's really, but absolutely, right, when you have this new story that you build up, or I guess an old story in some sense, right? You build an old story from scratch almost, right? But when you have that kind of a legend or that kind of a myth about something, all of a sudden it is their building. And it makes perfect sense that they would reclaim it, and voila, there we go. And now we'll fight forever about it,
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Goodness, that's amazing. That is really fascinating. And I did not know any of that. So that is very fascinating. Now, before we move to another topic, I do want to ask you, where can people find information about the webinar where you'll be speaking, the Sacred Spaces webinar? Because that, asking for a friend, of course, because I actually would like very much to tune in.
Well, I would direct them to a couple of places. If they're on Facebook, to please first off follow the University of St. Catherine's Facebook page, because that has, as you would expect, Facebook is just updated at a much more rapid pace. But also the USK website, which is just usk.edu. And also it will be put on the Institute of Orthodox Christian Studies pages as well. So I would just check those, but it will be in towards the end of this month. Yeah.
Okay.
I think in the last 2 days.
When is the webinar itself? When is that happening?
That is, it's going to be happening, I believe, on the 28th of June.
Excellent. So it'll be this month.
But
wonderful.
We will to be confirmed, but it should certainly be happening then.
Well, it's very different when it's a webinar, right? Because if you had to have, a conference center and hotel rooms, you would know the dates for sure because you can't move the dates. But then when it's online, it's so flexible, which in a way is great, and in another way is kind of painful. But I find it very interesting. You'll have so many people able to attend online who could never have come down to San Diego and done it. So it's a great opportunity. On the one hand, it's painful when you have something planned that should be in person, and then all of a sudden you find out you have to do it online. But I think again and again, we're finding that it's an interesting opportunity. It's a different sort of thing, isn't it?
Yes, and the reason that the date's sort of a bit up, has been a bit up in the air, has been just trying to figure out when exactly it's most convenient, really, to everyone, our students and anyone else that would be interested in it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that's excellent. Wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to put the link to the St. Catherine's website on our Facebook page.
Thank you.
And of course, you can also search on Facebook to find the University of St. Catherine and follow the Facebook account of St. Catherine's, because then you'll probably get faster information, more up-to-date information. So now let's talk. I want to shift gears a little bit because there's something I wanted to discuss with you actually, a year and a half ago, and we didn't get to it then, and we have to get to it this year. Tell me about your work with vestments. So you have a history of working with fashion, and just for those people who missed the early one, or the previous episode, can you kind of fill us in real quickly on what your history with fashion is and how that becomes work in the world of Orthodox vestments?
Yes. Look, I've always been something of a French duke when it comes to fashion. All right? I've always expressed myself through my clothing.
Excellent.
And so, look, yes, I found work in various different capacities for designers in the past. It's not as if I was, head designer for anyone or anything like that. I was a young man. But yeah, I did do design work for I designed shoes. I worked in a couple of various, Italian fashion companies, and I've always just had an appreciation for really beautiful and high quality materials. I'm just that way, I suppose. Mm-hmm. My grandmother used to embroider, and that was something that's, I guess, just kind of stuck with me. All of the vestments and in the high church environment when I was growing up were a big draw for me, honestly. So yeah, I met the artistic director of Riza, Father Rade Radan, who is an Australian priest, at one of our diocesan gatherings here in Los Angeles, and we just sort of hit it off because of my background, and being able to speak to fabric and construction and design value and all of that kind of stuff. And at that time, I was a reader, I was a parish board president, and so I was involved in the church, but I was a little bit more sort of free. And I eventually, I was hired by them in, I think, 2013. Although I'd done various odd jobs beforehand, and the idea was that I would come on and advise in various capacities, because it's such a small ministry, it's Father Ada and his wife, Melissa. And she has a background as well in production of clothing, and it's a nice little team. You know, it has people sometimes think that it's this big operation, or they get cross with me because we don't have Amazon Prime style delivery, but each of us is doing 100 jobs at once. For that, and I just emphasize that it's not a private business. We are there to raise funds for St. Sava College, which is our Orthodox high school, which will be opening, I think, later this year, God willing, with everything how it is at the moment. But it's certainly ready to go, and so we're very happy about that. And I look forward to going there and seeing the fruits of the labor there. But it's also incredibly exciting. And, those of your listeners I trust that they have good taste because they listen to your shows. So I'm sure that they're familiar with Riza Vestments.
Absolutely. I'm sure they are. If not, actually, I assume you have a website, right, for Riza Vestments? Yes,
it's www.riza.com.au, AU for Australia.
Okay.
And we do essentially we try and do everything that we can, but we specialize in hand embroidery, and so all of our icons are hand embroidered, and everything is designed in-house, and it's a really very intense but highly rewarding experience. And I was very lucky because I've only ever worn Riza vestments. I'm sure that's going to make a lot of people envious, and I'm very glad about that.
Excellent. Well, I've put that on our Facebook page as well, in case people want to find Riza vestments, and they really are beautiful. They're just gorgeous. You travel around sometimes to different Orthodox conferences and like clergy laity conferences and things like that with the vestments, don't you?
That's right. Yeah. So sometimes people ask me what my title is. I really don't have one at all. Like I said,
yeah, this is the beauty of a small organization, right? Like when you only have a few people, everyone wears a lot of hats, and we don't bother with titles too much. But
yes, but look, that's actually one of the real joys, because I've met the overwhelming majority of clergy in the United States because of this, and that's been such an amazing thing. It's not about selling people or anything like that. It's just you get a little taste, I think, of what Orthodoxy is like in the different regions. What's concerning people. You can have really interesting and frank conversations in a collegial atmosphere, and I have really appreciated it. And out of it have come really, really great friendships as well. And the other thing is that people can really become involved, I think, with Riza in terms of design, and it's nice to be part of a wider artistic community. It's very collaborative. We do a lot of custom work, and that's a real joy. The whole idea really with Riza was that it was going to be that you see a lot of brocade, right? And actually brocade is coming back around again, as with, sounds crass, but with everything there's fashion, right? And so
right.
It went out for a bit, and we started to make the emphasis on embroidery and motif rather than you've just got, your brocade and that's sort of it.
Right. The brocade is the fabric that has like the design already in it, right?
Yes,
I don't know any of the terminology for it, but that's what you're talking about, is these fabrics that have like crosses, so rather ornately designed into the fabric itself, versus the vestments where you'll see like just the fabric is plain and you've embroidered something on top of it. Is that what you mean?
Yes, in general, and being able also to source really good silk. That's been a good thing as well. The drape and flow of the vestments is really important because the liturgy is about movement. The movement is important, and we shouldn't think about vestments as just the priest's clothing or uniform. It's part of the overall liturgical art of the space, and that's something that we need to think about also. We need to think about that deeply. You think about the icons in a space. You have people. It looks really bad sometimes if you have icons that are really jarring. That the contrast is too hard, and sometimes that happens if something is donated, say, 50 years ago, and then you get something else in, and it's a totally different iconographer. So it's better, to try and go with a cohesive.
Right.
A cohesive whole, but the vestments are part of that too.
That's lovely. That is lovely.
Well, and unfortunately, we do tend to think about them as just something for the priest to wear, but then they don't belong to the priest really. They belong to the church. That would be nice if we could effect a bit of a change there. Yeah.
That really is lovely, and I think our listeners will maybe look at them a little bit differently. Well, next time they're in church, if they're in church, or maybe on YouTube, or however we next see vestments. But may it be blessed. But Father Dave, this has been just delightful having the opportunity to talk to you again, and I look forward to that webinar. Actually, I think I'm going to try to join you if indeed it happens on the 28th. That's on my calendar now. But thank you so much for joining us again. It's been a delight.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you. And thank you to our audience. Thank you for coming back tonight, and join us again next Sunday, and we'll get to know another very interesting Orthodox person. Have a